This is our final presentation of HB 147, which is limiting cell phone usage in public schools. And we're just going to be presenting our comparative research with other legislation and providing some final recommendations.
Okay, so first for the synopsis and implementation. So the main point of passing this legislation is to improve the educational experience, mainly for elementary and middle school students in Maryland. So the main problems that most students face are disruptions from phones and other devices. But another pertinent problem is cyberbullying, as social media heightens a lot of bullying that could affect the emotional state of students. And this is mainly tailored toward younger students, so elementary, middle schoolers, because they lack the maturity to use devices properly, which many high schoolers likely have. But now for the implementation. So first we require each local board of education to adopt and publish a student technology use policy. And this is meant to limit the smartphone use of students strictly during instructional time periods, so when the teacher is teaching. Next is the policy should appear on the local board's website and in each school's student handbook so that it's publicly available and that there's no questions about it. Next, there should be some exceptions, especially in need for students who have health-related problems or if there's teacher discretion. And finally, um, boards with existing qualifying policies are exempt, but new policies should and can be created with existing resources. So now for some of the notable similar legislation across the United States. First, we have something like Maryland SB 112. So the point of this is that each county in Maryland must develop a policy preventing school cell phone use in class. And this exception only really applies if the teacher allows for phones for educational purposes. Next, we have Texas House Bill 1481. So this prohibits students from using personal communication wireless devices during instructional periods, and it's meant to minimize hindrances. Um, and we also have stuff like the Florida HB 379, which permitted the use of cell phones, except once again during instructional periods. And there was actually stored locations for students to keep their phones, and it's also aimed to improve the education environment. So I didn't want to go through every single one of these pieces of legislation because it's pretty repetitive, but the main points from this are um, prohibiting students from using their phones or other personal devices mainly will prevent um, like disruptions to the teaching environment. And that's also why the exceptions are if the teacher allows it.
Okay, so in Maryland, we have a Senate and a House. So HB 147 is currently going through the House, but right now there's also a Senate bill, which is SB 130, which also relates to cell phone use. Now, there's a lot of key differences and similarities between these two bills, so I think we'll just cover them here. So, for SB 130, a lot of the differences are kind of in the administration. So, the policies must be published in student handbooks, shared with staff, and the big thing is that they have to be reviewed every 2 years just to make sure they're staying up to date and relevant. And the Maryland State Department of Education will develop guidelines, practices, and policy options in with the consultation of stakeholders, which is parents and school administrators, district workers, and the Maryland State Department of Education will also be collecting data as it implements this program to make sure that it is effective and achieving its intended goal. And they will also be convening a statewide task force on student cell phone use to issue more recommendations by April 2025. So for some general recommendations for HB 147, so from one of our recommendations is to make sure that phones aren't being used at all during the instructional day, which includes during lunch and in the hallways. So this means that from first to final bell, K through 12 students in Maryland should not use phones except in special cases where the teacher does allow it. And this should actually say K through 8 students. Sorry about that. And then students with medical needs, of course, may keep their phones for treatment because it's something unavoidable and I think it's the right thing to do. And allowing cell phone use under teacher discretion will streamline the educational and teaching process because fully navigating around phones and only using maybe school provided Chromebooks and laptops may not be the best method for every teacher and lesson. So, and a lot of these recommendations are made because a full ban like the one made in Howard County could spark a lot of strong pushback from students and families who may feel really dissatisfied with the new policies. And so our approach balances our instructional focus as with limited student relaxation after class. So our recommendations in regards to aligning HB 147 more closely with Senate Bill 130 to pass both of them, hopefully, is to include only elementary and middle school students, which HB 147 already does, but Senate Bill 130 also includes high schoolers. And using keywords that Senate Bill 130 implements, such as cellular devices and personal electronic devices, could make the definition of what is and isn't allowed more clear. So for enforcement, Senate Bill 130 actually provides really good guidelines for having safe storage of the phones during the school day so that students aren't responsible for them, as well as disciplinary measures for students who are caught having their phones out. And so for transparency, we actually borrowed that from Senate. We actually want to borrow some of the amendments from Senate Bill 130, and we would like for HB 147 to include an amendment where it is reviewed every 2 years, and this will just help it stay up to date and maintain its relevance. And for state involvement, similar to SB 130, HB 147 should encourage discussion among students and teachers and other consultants to help create guidelines for the bill because I think it's very important to have input from the affected groups when we're making these policies. So, as for the intended effects of HB 147, we hope to see, I mean, a lot of school districts that have implemented cell phone bans during the instructional day have seen a 15% increase in class participation and a 10% increase in standardized test scores. And these results were actually observed in Montgomery County in Maryland just a couple years back. So I think getting rid of phones has empirically shown evidence that it boosts students' participation in class. And it'll also help with student mental health because without phone bans, cyberbullying chances rise by 30% compared to school districts with phone bans. And 64% of students are pressured to respond to notifications during school time. So getting rid of a lot of the pressure and distraction that comes with cell phones is super important and a major part of our bill. And also, the Pew Research Center states that 72% of teachers report cell phones as a major issue in classrooms. And